So now we're going to move on to the next stage, which is basically stippling the paint on. I don't do it in any particular order. Don't use your best brush because it will ruin it. As you can see from this one, the stippling process is quite brutal. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick, to start with, dark rust. These are great little milk bottle tops. Doesn't need a huge amount of paint in. I'm going to pick this up, dab it in, and I'm going to go for coverage, getting it all in. And you can see I'm not being very particular with how it goes, which is fine. Let's face it, rust is random, it goes everywhere. Going on at this end, going around that side. And this is why I say it doesn't really matter how much or how little of the first coats that you leave on, because it's going to get covered over totally in this. And then we're going to go and do the inside again. Now what I do on the inside is I tend to lay more along the top edges. So I tend to do it really thick along there and almost continuous, but still stippled and splodged on. Can you see that? And then at the top, and then I start working down into the actual main body. Okay, go along the top rail, get that nicely covered. And you can see that's what it's currently looking like at the moment. Mr. panel there, I'll put that down, and while the paint's drying I'll do this one. You can see this one isn't quite as dark, and you'll see there's a splodge there. What does it matter? It'll get covered. So again, all we're doing is randomly stippling on. You can get in the edges, along the top. Rust goes everywhere, doesn't it? Just stipple and stipple away. See that splodge there? That'll go. See, it's gone. Doesn't matter. Do the end, and you can see I'm being totally random with it. There's no set pattern. And then I'll come to the inside again, and again I want the top part to be well covered, so I always try and make sure that there's a good layer on that top part. And then I'm just going down inside. You can see that's why I say you don't want a decent brush for it. Okay, so that's that one done as well, and I'm going to just put that to one side. I'm then going to get another paint, so another one, and I think we'll go for light rust again, Model Air range, and again just needs a bit more mixing up. That typical, come to video and it doesn't go right. Let's try again. So there you go, that looks better. You don't need a huge amount, just enough to say that you've got some. And we'll get onto this one. And again, you can see I'm using the same brush, just working all over, getting it into those nooks and crannies, around the ridges, the ribs, and I'm just really applying a good amount. Again, it doesn't matter what it looks like because a lot of this is going to come off, but what it's doing is it's building the rust up in layers. You see what I mean? It's very bright there actually, but it'll dry. And then again, we're going to go along the inside. As you can probably see. And we're just literally going everywhere, blending it in a bit and just making it as mucky as you want. So that's the inside, that's the outside. Do a little bit more down this side, I think, there. You'll know when you're happy with it. A little bit on the edge. Just pop that down to dry while I move on to the next one. And again, I'm just doing the same, splodging away. Going all over. People have different techniques, but this is what I find works for me. You find a technique that works for you, go with it. It doesn't have to be like this, but you just play about until you find something that you're happy with. That's all I do. And you have to accept that sometimes it's going to look pretty bad, and other times it'll look okay. Everybody's got to start somewhere. And we're just carrying on down, putting loads of rust everywhere. You can see how it looks. Again, doesn't matter. It looks well rusty. That side looks totally different to that side. That's okay. That's not a problem. And then we'll go for another rust colour, I think. We've got some different coloured light rust there. Oh, we've got orange rust. Let's have some orange rust. See, it looks very similar to that one, and it is, but there is just slight shade differences. And again, I'm just stippling it everywhere. The stippling as well gives quite a good effect of depth rather than spraying, because you're building the paint layers up. Doesn't have to be neat. Don't worry about it being neat. I picked these wagons up off the Dapol shop. I think there was about £7 or £8 each. So not massively expensive if it went wrong, but if it goes right, you've got a nice set of wagons at a relatively small cost that you can add to over time. You don't have to buy them all in one go, and you've got the satisfaction of knowing that you've done them, which is something else I quite like as well. And you know that you'll not be able to buy anything like that out of the shop, which is quite nice. And we just carry on stippling away, blending it in and stippling. Don't worry if there's some white showing. There's going to be a lot more white showing shortly, believe me. Nearly run out of that orange, so I'll just put a little bit more in just to finish the inside off. That would be enough. Good thing with these milk bottle tops is that you can wash them after you've used them. Okay, I think for now I'm happy with that, and we're nearly ready to move on to the next stage. Now some people might say, well actually they want a wagon that's rusted. Go for it like that. You know, you sometimes don't see the the underbody through it. Okay, so the outside's dried a little bit. So what we're going to try and do is start to remove some of that grime that we've put on again. Again, cotton bud, wagon, thinner, and I'm, as you can see, not rubbing, I'm just hitting now. I don't know if you can see, like that. So I'm taking it off even more randomly. And it doesn't leave a lot on. Think about as well where the rust might go. Lower panels, around the lines, around the ridges. You can even scratch it as well. You see that scratching like that? And all we're doing is just taking it back to the white, to the black. You can even take some of the initial black off as well if you want to. Look. So it doesn't look too bad. And we just keep going until you've got what you're happy with. You have to keep changing your cotton buds because they do get rather damaged quite quickly. You can see how that's going. Taking a bit more off. You can see that's one side. So it's gone from looking like that to looking like that. And we're going to do the same on this side. I'm just going to wet the paint down a bit so it's a bit easier to work with. I think it's maybe dried off a little bit because I'm working in the shed. Damp the brush again, there we go, look. And it's coming off, but that's fine if it's harder to come off because it will come off. You just have to work at it, and it scratches off, which also makes it look quite effective as well, I think. You see how that's scratching? And you're not damaging the wagon because you're using the soft cotton bud, but it just brings a different dimension to how it looks. On the next wagon I'll show you how to do it with a brush as well, because that can be quite effective. And remember, there's still another 2 or 3 layers to go on top of this until we get to where we want to be, finished finally. So hopefully you'll stick with it with me. If you do get bored, I'm sorry, put the kettle on, have a brew, whatever. And then these are the hardest parts to do because the cotton bud doesn't get in very well. And I have found what I'm going to use on these ends is a brush. You can see, look, it's not gone in very well. So I'm just going to use a brush. And I'm just dabbing and tapping. Remember to clean the brush though regularly, because all you'll be doing is just putting the paint back on that you're taking off if you don't. And again, I'm going to do this end, plenty of the thinners on. And again, just dabbing, drying the brush off, some clean thinners, tapping away. And it can just take a few minutes just to do it. But you'll know when you're happy with the finish that you've got. Just going to dry that off to see what it looks like. And then I'm just going to go back to the cotton bud again for the end, because that's wet it off well. See how it's coming off? It's coming off a lot easier now. Of course, if you're working with enamels, you probably have a little bit more time to work with because they don't dry quite as quickly. But But the beauty of working with acrylics is I like the quick drying time and they're relatively easy to recover. So I'm just going to wrap that in a bit of cloth just to dry it off there, because it's a little bit damp. Now we've got the first pass of the outside, so I'm just going to move on to the inside now. And again, I'm just being totally random with this, because the inside would have been rusted quite heavily. Okay, that looks a mess, which is fine. It'll dry nicely though. I'm going to put that down to dry, and then we'll start on this one. So I'm going to start on this one, and I'm going to get my cloth down ready to blab, and I'm going to use the brush. I'm going to just paint the whole side, dry the brush a little bit, work it in, dry the brush, and I'm going to the cotton bud. And this time I'm rubbing it side to side. As you can see, up and down, side to side. You don't have to get it all the same, a random pattern. You can see you do sometimes get the little bit of cotton wool on the ridges. Just remember to pull those off, that's fine again. How much you take off is down to you. You'll know when you're ready to change your cotton bud. Remember, no wagon. One wagon looks the same as the next wagon when they've been in use. You might get dirt build up in the same areas, but it will not look the same. When you get close up, there'll be differences. So I just try and keep things as random as possible. So that's that side done. Looks okay. We'll get the brush, we'll coat this side. Just coating it nicely. Just wets the paint down and it makes it a bit easier to work with. Why don't we try with a stipple brush, see how that brings it off? Because that's a little bit stiffer and a bit more aggressive. In fact, let's try with the ruined stipple brush, shall we? See what that does. You're just playing about and seeing what effects you can get. Actually, I don't think that's too bad. What it's doing, it's a rough edge. The bristles are rough. I'm just going to wipe it down with what I'm trying to show is that you can do this with just about anything that you've got hanging around. Now, they don't have to be rust coloured paints. You can use oranges, you can use browns, you can use blacks, you can mix your own paint colours up. It's quite easy to do that. You can see how that's looking, nice and rusted. And then I'm just going to come on to the end. We'll try it with the stiffer brush. And see it's coming off there. And then I'm just going to go over it again with a clean but dampened cotton bud. Remember, dirt gets into the nooks and crannies. And this end, I'm just going to do it with a cotton bud, I think, just because I can. So far, to get to this stage, it's taking me, what, 40 minutes? the two wagons. That's on a warm day, so everything's drying a little bit quicker. But you can see that you can soon get a few of these done reasonably quickly. So look at the inside, what we're going to do on the inside. Let's just try and get it all mucked down. Now this is interesting, you can see how the effect on this one is slightly different on the inside. I don't know if you can see, but you're getting there like some of the older dryer paint stain on, and the rust effect like on that side. You see? And I'm just letting it all run down and congregate in the bottom of the chutes, and that's fine, because that's probably where a lot of it would go. Right, we'll leave those to dry for a little while before we move on to the next one. Okay, so now I'm going to go and introduce another colour, which is light rust. Again, it says Panzer Aces. It's part of the Vallejo range that I think people use on military modelling. But again, you don't need these colours. You can use colours which you can find and buy generally and just mix them to suit yourselves. So I think we shall use this brush again. Just dry it off a little bit. And all we're going to do again is just splodge away. Because all we're trying to do is just build up that rust, and most of it's going to come off, but it's the important part that's left that we're interested in when we've taken it off. Again, it's very quick. The difference with this one though is I'm going to take this one off pretty quickly. I'm not going to put another one on above it, just to see what it does more than anything. But we're going to do both wagons at the same time. It gives each wagon just a little bit of drying time. So there. I know my hand keeps getting in the way as I'm doing it, I'm sorry. Like I say, I'm not an expert. So, here we go. And again, we're just going all over. Underneath, on the side. Doesn't have to be any particular order. See how I'm doing that in there? I'm just lobbing loads of it on. Just want it all covered. And then I'm going to put that down. I'm going to get some more cotton buds. It's one thing that you'll need is loads of cotton buds, but you can pick them up pretty cheap for £1 or so a pack. And then we're just going to start dipping the cotton bud in the thinners and just start taking it off again. You see? But it just brings a different colour, different slight shade in. And this is where we're starting to want to be at soon. You've had your base colours down, and we're starting off with the darker colours, and I'm working, just slowly working through. But you can see you're getting a bit of a rusty look there, which is good. And again, like I keep saying, if you don't like the look, just go back, soak the body, and start again. Onto this side, rubbing away. Going to dispose of that one and get a clean one. one word of advice I'll give you is, if you think it looks right, it probably is, and that's probably the time to stop with what you're doing. But you can see with this how it's gone from white to being covered in blacks and browns, to have that taken off, to slowly starting to be covered in oranges, browns. And I've got some washes to go over with, including another black wash, which is very useful, just to dirty everything down a little bit. But again, it's people's preference, people's choice, you don't have to do that. But it'll all start to come together, which I'm really pleased about. We're going to go with a darker colour again in a minute on the inside. I'll put that to one side just to start letting it dry down, and we'll just start taking it off this one. Same process again, but I'll turn the video off for this one. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a bit of a darker colour on the outside again, just splodging over. You can see I'm not filling in it as much as I was before. Okay, and then we're just going to go a bit on the inside as well, starting to darken it down again. I'll leave that for a minute and I'll do this side as well. And again, you can see that's where I'm at with the second one that I quickly broke off to did. And I'm just going to splodge all the way round. Again, it's nothing as heavy this time, as you can see. Heavy enough, but not quite as heavy. And then the inside again. Some people like the inside really dirty and rusty. That's fine. Some people like it not as dirty as rusty. Okay, so that's that one done. I'm going to put that down. And then I'm going to start with a paintbrush, just to show you this. You see how it's not quite as aggressive, but it does also leave quite a nice finish. I need a little bit more thinners in the tub, and again I'm going to keep dipping, dabbing, and just working round like that. Just trying to clean the paint that off that I'm taking, so I'm not putting it on elsewhere. So it's building up really nicely now in the ledges. I've got one or two patches, which is good. And then on the inside, I'm going to leave the inside at the moment. Quite happy with how that's looking. And then let's do the second one so you can see. Again, just, it's almost turning it into a wash, but it does leave patches where you want it. Now on the inside of this one, it's a little bit thicker, so don't know if you can see. I'm just going like that, taking the paint off, just feathering it up and down and into all the crannies, and I'm just building the paint layers up still. There. Okay, so I'm also introducing another colour now, which is called Burnt Umber. Again, this is just going to be splodged on again. I've done a little bit more work on it just since the last time, just taking it down a bit, taking a bit more of the paint off, but I'm using the Burnt Umber on the inside. And it's just going to be another base, that's all. Because I'm quite happy with how the outside look, and I've got a couple of washes to go on that. So again, this is just going to go as a base on the inside again, to start laying some more paint down on top of it and taking it off still. Probably using the wrong words and the wrong terminology, I don't know. It's just what I think it is. Okay, so that's like that. Again, the old faithful cotton bud, and I'm just taking little bits off and just letting it dry. You can see how it's building up quite nicely there. I'm quite pleased with that. And on the other side it's building up quite nicely as well. Can you see him? I don't know if you'll see him properly, whether it'll focus or not, maybe not. And now it's just a case of just continuing to do that. That's the part that takes the time, just building everything up. But I think it's looking suitably dirted in there. So it's getting there, looking quite nice, and of course mustn't forget the ridge around there. So what I'm going to do now, I've put the burnt umber on the inside, and I'm just going to put some German black brown just to tie it all in together. Again, it's being splodged. It's amazing what colours rust come out as when you actually look at it. And I'm just going to go over the tops a bit like that, just to make sure I've got a good covering. And then you can see, here's one I prepared earlier. I always wanted to say that. So that's one that I've done, and I'm just going to start taking it off a little bit again. But I'm going to let this dry just a little bit first before I start taking any more off. Okay, so we've got the inside. I've given it about 15 minutes drying time, and I'm just going to chip away gently at the paint I've put on. You can see there's very little coming off, just till I get it where I'm quite happy with it. And again, you wouldn't do it the same level in each one because every one would be different.